Okay, so when I'm bathing a dog, I like there to be, a little bit of a suds. And I like to shampoo the dog once. If you're dealing with, just a really, really dirty coat, you might want to do 2 shampoos, but generally I just like to shampoo once. I like to make sure that I'm thoroughly applying it and, really working it into the coat, making sure you're getting in between the paw pads and in like the armpits and getting their sanitary clean. Also scrubbing the face really good. And then I like to use a lot of water pressure, make sure that you're getting all the product out of the coat. Then I like to do a separate conditioner. It basically replaces the sebum that the coat produces naturally. It actually helps repel dirt and debris, so that is, extremely good for the skin and coat health of the pet. Then when I do my final rinse, I make sure that I'm rinsing all of the product out. If you leave any conditioner or shampoo in the coat, it'll actually weigh it down and make it feel really dirty. So making sure that you're rinsing all of that out before you start drying. So when we're drying the dog, we use high velocity dryers. I like to use a happy hoodie. It goes over their head and just kind of hugs their ears and protects them against the noise of the dryer. Just kind of gives their head a little hug. So we're gonna go ahead and start drying. So when I'm doing the nails, I like to start with trimming, and then I offer an add-on service in my salon for filing the nails after they're trimmed. And what that does is it helps smooth out the nail. I'm able to get the nail as short as possible and smooth out and round out the edges. What you're looking for when you're trimming the nails is this dot in the center of the nail is the quick. And so by getting all of the nails down to that dot, you're getting them as short as possible. You also want to watch for that dot as you're clipping and grinding the nails. And as you can see, his legs are a bit longer than the rest of his body, so we're gonna just scissor his legs. And that just adds like some cute style to the dog. We're also going to give him some rear angulation, so it's gonna be a little bit shorter up here, and we're gonna leave it longer down here. So what I'm gonna do is just start by setting the length of the paws. So I like to lift the leg and comb all the hair down around the paws. And I'm just gonna trim off everything that's hanging over the paw pad, so that all the hair is just flush with the paw pad. So when you set the foot down, you can see it gives it a little bit of a lifted look on the back. And we're going to cut a straight line in the front of the paw. We're gonna find the nails and just make a line straight in the front. Then what we're gonna do is we're gonna connect the back of the paw to the front of the paw. And as you can see, I'm holding my shears at a 45-degree angle. So I'm cutting everything that's touching the table. Holding the shear at a 45-degree angle creates a really nice bevel. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip my shears around in my hand, and I'm going to match that same angle on the inside of the leg. Okay, so then I did that from the back. Now I'm gonna come along the front and just continue that line on the inside of the foot. Okay, and then I'm going to pick the foot up and just trim the hairs with the thinning shear just to soften the edges. So that is how I trim the feet. Then what I like to do is, you notice I did not trim anything on the top of the foot. I focused all along the base of the foot. I like to trim the top of the foot when I trim the leg. So I like to just trim the top of the foot directly into the leg. And that helps give the leg a nice pillar or column look. So you want to make sure when you're combing the hair, you're fluffing the hair out, that you're kind of pulling it directly out. You don't want the hair to be like forced up, and you don't want the hair to fall down. You just want it to be straight out from the body. So you can either fluff out like this, or you can fluff out like this, as long as the hair is sticking straight out from the rest of the body. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my curved shear, and I'm going to come from the back of the dog, and I'm just going to take this straight down. And then you can fluff it again. Do that same line. So when you're scissoring the leg, you want to trim the hair in a way that complements the dog's structure, and so that you can kind of accentuate the good features and not accentuate the bad features. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to add a little bit of angulation into Theo's groom today, which will make his haircut just look a lot nicer. So what I did here is I scissored the face of the leg, and then I gave a little bit of angle on the rear of the hock here, so that the top of the hock ends up being the longest point. And where the hock is the longest point, we're gonna match the front of the hock being the shortest point. And this will give the dog the appearance of having some knee in the stifle. Then when you're trimming the front of the leg, the stifle area, you want to leave it pretty full so that you can make the dog appear more square. I'm just getting the inside of this leg. You want to make sure that you're getting the inside just as much as you're getting the outside of the leg. So you can see how the outside of the leg is nice and straight. We want the same thing on the inside. So we're going to take our scissor, just come straight down. So then when we're doing the front leg, we're going to do the same steps. We're going to start with the foot, which will help set your base. We're going to pick up the foot, we're going to comb everything down, and just scissor everything that's sticking outside of the paw pad. We're going to make sure that all the hair is flush with the paw pad. So I'm going to comb everything down, and I'm just going to trim a straight line in the front of his foot. Then we're just going to connect the line on the back of the foot to the front of the foot. And again, we're holding the shears at a 45-degree angle. Good boy. And then we're going to follow that same line on the inside of the foot. Sometimes you have to lift it up in order to get that angle. Then I'm going to take my thinning shear in that same angle of 45-degree from the table and just thin the edges to give it a soft, natural look. We're ready to trim the leg. So again, we're just going to trim the top of the foot directly into the leg in order to give it a nice pillar appearance. I'm going to take my curved shear fluff up and
leg section by section. We want him to have a little bit of a flare to his legs, so we're gonna cut the top a little bit shorter and leave the bottom a little bit fuller. When you fluff the hair, it gets the hair to stand up so that you can trim it evenly. It's important to keep fluffing the hair a lot so that you can make sure that you're getting the hair thoroughly trimmed. So we're just trying to make the inside of this leg a nice straight line. So we're not going to trim a ton off the back of this leg because we want to leave the back pretty full. The goal is to leave the back of the front leg fuller and the front of the back leg fuller so that you can create the illusion of less space in between the dog. And that will make the dog appear shorter. So I'm going to take my thinning shear and just kind of go over my scissor work to just smooth everything out. We just have to get the little inside edge that's hard to get. Sometimes you have to lift up the other leg in order to get it. Okay, so now we're ready to clip the body. Using the 2-comb with the number 30 blade underneath the clip comb. He's not getting a crest, so I'm just starting about where his shoulders are, and I'm just following the structure of the dog. And I am putting a little bit of pressure in the clipper onto the dog just to, get the hair cut more evenly. And on the back leg here, I'm just cutting the hip a little bit shorter. So when I'm shaving the back leg, I'm gonna just be skimming the clipper off of the dog into the longer leg. So I don't want to trim the legs the same length as the body, so I'm touching the clipper down to the dog and then slowly lifting it off of the dog. And then what I'm going to do is trim the back of the leg a little bit shorter, and what that does is create some angulation in the rear with this being shorter and then the front of the leg being longer. You want to take the clipper down to about where the leg bends. So when you get to that bend in the rear of the leg, you want to start taking the clipper and skimming it off of the dog. So this is the shortest point, right where the bend of the leg is, and that should match the longest point on the front of the knee. And then the top of the hock is going to be your longest point, and then the front of the hock will be your shortest point. So that gives the whole leg a nice angled look. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and move on to trimming his rib cage. So what we're going to do is we're going to set his tuck up. So you want to be about 1/3 of the dog is where you want to set the tuck up. So I'm going to take that straight down, and by moving the tuck up, it's going to create a shorter appearance on the dog. So normally, you have to find where the natural tuck up is, which is about right here. And what we're going to do is move that tuck up forwards with hair so that it makes the dog appear shorter in body. So if your tuck up is naturally here, what we're gonna do is move it up here. And you can do that by taking your clipper and bringing it straight down to the point that you want that tuck up to be. And you're gonna leave the hair back here to fill in. And the way you decide where you want to set your tuck up will depend on the structure of the dog. But typically, if you cut your dog into thirds, you want that tuck up to be at 1/3 of the dog. So then we're gonna go ahead and trim his shoulder. Because we're leaving him with a little bit more of a flared look, we can take the trimmer just above his elbow and start flaring it out. And then when you're trimming the chest, you want to extend the head up to make sure that the skin is taut in the neck and chest area. You're just gonna hug the clipper to the structure of the dog, right in between his front legs. And then you can see on the shoulder, we're trying to create a straight line from his shoulder right into his leg. And this creates just a nice straight line from the shoulder into the front leg. So you have a nice seamless transition. You don't want to leave a bunch of hair in this area because then from the front, the dog will look like he has really big, bulgy shoulders. You want it to be a nice, flat, smooth transition. So the last part of trimming or shaving down the body of the dog is we're gonna wanna get the underline. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna lift up his leg. I'm just gonna take the clipper and just go right along his underline. And then you can lift his back leg and just skim the other part of his underline here. So then we're gonna do his tail. You wanna make sure that the tail is free of tangles. And then if you're looking at the tail from the side, you can kind of see how it's really bulky back here. So what we wanna do is take that down so it's not so bulky. So we're gonna take our chunker and we're just going to put the tail up in its natural position and trim the base of the tail. This will also help make sure that the tail doesn't get any bathroom on it. Then what we can do is take the tail and collect, and we're just gonna trim the very ends of the tail. Okay, then we can part the tail down the middle. Just take a chunker and just lightly trim off the dead ends. Last part is you want to fluff the tail up where the tail meets the body, and you want to just create a nice smooth transition into the base of the tail. So then after you clip down the body, you want to go back and clean up a couple areas. So what I would do is I'd clean up this back side of this leg here and kind of the bum area just to keep it nice and crisp and clean. And really show off those rear angles. You're also gonna wanna go over your clipper line where we went from the short body into the long legs. Just go over that again to give it a nice smooth transition. You're also gonna want to kind of scissor in your tuck up area so it's not so fluffy up top. And then you're gonna wanna kind of do a little rainbow in here so that you can just kind of scissor the hair to show off where we moved up that tuck up. You're also going to want to go over your elbow area, your armpit area in here, clean up your underline a little bit with the scissor, and then also just kind of clean up the front of this chest area. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and start on Theo's head since his body is all done. What I like to do with dogs when I'm kind of figuring out where I want to start shaving on their heads, if we were leaving a crest on Theo, I would do that last, but since we're not leaving a crest on him, I'm gonna go ahead and shave his neck. What I like to do is create a U with my fingers and feel where the back of his skull and his ears are, and I just wanna start just below that for shaving. So what I'm going to do is start shaving down his neck, but I want to leave a little bit on the back of his head so that I can blend that into his body. You want to make sure that you're keeping the ears out of the clipper. You also want to make sure that you're holding the head up so that the skin is taut in this neck area. So I'm going to take my Bravera and I'm going to set it to a number 10. And I'm just gonna scoop in his eyes from corner to corner. Sometimes dogs can be a little bit sensitive with the clipper around their eye area, so you wanna go slow, lots of positive reinforcement. And we're just gonna scoop out where those tear stains are. But we're gonna leave a little bit of fluff just to give him that nice teddy bear expression. And then my next step is to pull all this hair around his nose back pull out just these little lip hairs. You can see how they're all stained. So what I like to do is take a number 10, and we're just going to trim these hairs just the width of his nose there. So that just kind of cleans up that little area. Then we're going to lift up his lip. So this area where the lip divots here, this is called the flue area. This collects a lot of saliva and food, and it just gets really dirty. So what I like to do is take my number 10 blade and just scoop this area out lightly. So I'm gonna do that on both sides. Then we're gonna check his ear canals. He actually does not have a lot of hair in his ears. Usually at this point, this is when I would shave some hair if he had a lot of hair in his ears, but he doesn't have a lot of hair in his ears, so we're gonna go ahead and leave that alone. So then when I'm trimming the face, the first place I like to start is on this jawline. So I'm gonna go ahead and fold his ear back, comb everything down. I'm gonna take my curved shear. I'm gonna start where his nose is, give a nice half moon shape from his nose into kind of where it meets, where his jaw meets his ear. Once we set that line, I'm going to then take my curved shear and I'm just going to round up that line up into his muzzle. So I'm focusing most of my cutting on this bottom line. I'm not taking a lot of length off up here. I'm just rounding out from the bottom. Then I'm gonna curl his lip out here and just tidy the underside of this lip line. I like to do it this way just to, I think it's a little bit safer, just so that I am not cutting in there, not knowing where the lip is. Then we're going to comb down this chin area. We're gonna cut right where the jaw meets the throat. We're gonna make a nice clean line, then we're gonna comb it down and tilt his head down a little bit more and just follow this line all the way up to the front of his jaw. So you can see after you cut that line, you can see a nice definition being created between his head and the rest of his body. Okay, so then we're gonna do the same thing on the other side. Okay, now we're going to trim the top of his muzzle, so I'm going to comb everything up, and then I'm going to take my thinning shears, perpendicular. We want the muzzle to be rounded on top, where we want the middle of the muzzle to be at the longest point. So we're going to trim the back side nice and short, and then we're just going to lightly thin the middle so that he can see. And then we're gonna fluff up just the very front of the nose, and we're gonna thin the front a little bit shorter than the middle. So that way, the middle of the muzzle here is the longest. It's short here, and then this is a little fluffy. And this does take a lot of combing and scissoring, just because the muzzle is very curly, and you wanna make sure that you're kind of getting all the curls to lay the way that you want them to. Okay, now we're gonna go ahead and trim his visor line. So I'm gonna take my small curved shear, and I'm just going to separate out the eyelashes. I'm gonna make a cut, and I'm gonna go ahead and do the same thing on the other side. I'm gonna try to match the same angle. And we wanna keep his eyelashes because they're very long and cute, and they kind of curl out. Okay, so then once you kind of make that initial cut, then we're going to take our thinning shears and just kind of soften that line. tilts his head down, you want to see a U from eye to eye. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our thinning shear, we're gonna cut in and come up. That way, when you're looking at it, you can see this U from eye corner to eye corner. And that just helps give him a really nice expression to his face. Okay, now we're going to trim the sides of his head and the top of his head, and then we will start on his ears. So what I like to do is fluff everything up. I'm just going to take my thinning shear and just kind of blend everything. So for him today, I'm gonna leave his head a little bit bigger. So I'm gonna kind of use a ratio of about like 1/3 of his muzzle. So his muzzle is about 1/3 and then his head is about 2/3. So I'm just kind of doing a unbalanced proportion of his head, which is a really cute style if the owners can maintain it and if the dog has the right head shape for it. Once I trim the top of the head, I like to come from the side and I like to trim the hair looking at the side of the dog. I like to kind of follow the circle we have going on here. So I'm just gonna pull his ear forward and imagine as if this jawline is continuing right into the back. So I'm just going to kind of round the back of his head. Okay, we're gonna do the same thing on the other side. Now when you're looking at him from the front, you can kind of pull his ears up and his head up, and then you can see any areas that might not be perfectly round. So you want to try and have as balanced of a face as you can get here. Okay, so then the last step is just trimming his ears. Okay, so once you cut kind of a straight across line on the bottom, you want to make sure that the ear is laying in its natural position. And then I just like to take my thinning shear and just kind of go around and just kind of round out the ear. So we're going to do the same thing on this side. Okay, so now we gotta come to the front of the dog to make sure each side matches. Okay, I think he's done.
Running.